boost your Apple Mac IQ. Just to give you an idea, the two people that are going to be hosting it is myself. My name is David Lau. We also have Dave Demkowski on the question area of the webinar. Just to give you a review of the presentation, basically it's part of the Build Your Up and Ready Knowledge series, and there's going to be a 30-minute presentation and 30 minutes of QA. And you can also ask your questions at any time during the webinar webinar questions window. The big thing about this is I want to boost your IQ, and hopefully we can make it over easy. So right off the bat, we're going to quickly discuss the past, present, and future webinar events. We actually have a YouTube channel. It's noted there. And today's presentation, I've already actually uploaded it onto our Box account, and I'm hoping that you guys can download it right now because it references our blog. And on the blog, it has not only just the solution to a problem, but also kind of like the story behind it, how to get to that stage to solve the problem. So there's like so it's not just a solution, it's like how we got there basically. The last presentation of the year will be clean reinstalling Windows, and then the upcoming one will be setting up a network license manager on Mac OS X and Linux, and then troubleshooting rental issues. That will round off the 12 that we have planned. So please download this PowerPoint presentation because I'm only going to talk about the links basically, and we can go through it. And right off the bat, we have a poll question. And the question is, what is the Finder? The Mac equivalent of Task Manager, Windows Explorer, or the Start menu? Dave, how's the poll going? I guess when it's closed.
Almost there, just about there. Yep, I'm going to close it up now.
And can we show the results?
Let me check here. There we go.
Correct. Looks like 82% have chosen Windows Explorer, and that is correct. All right. The big thing right now, we're going to go to the next slide here, is anytime when you're installing Autodesk products, the first thing I always look at is there's two links. There's system requirements, which is like the basic requirements, and there's also a certified hardware list. If you're very detail-oriented, probably certified hardware is the route I would go because it gives you some hardware recommendations as well. So I've given those two links for our two core products, Maya and AutoCAD. There's also a link at the very bottom where we have the Up and Ready site, and basically I've tried to bookmark all the things that we kind of handle. You know, there's Knowledge Network, Help Docs, Install Form, Certified Hardware, System Requirements. So, you know, every time when we go there, it's just a quick link to get there. There's also a link to find out our Mac compatible software, and so right now we're going to cover Parallels and Boot Camp and Fusion as well. So we're going to cover all those topics. Okay, some of the key points that we have. All right, so the first one about system requirements. On the Mac, you have to go to Apple, About This Mac, then you got to click More Info, and then you click on System Report. And if you look on the System Requirements section, you'll notice I have a little red underline where it says AutoCAD for Mac 2015 System Requirements. It says MacBook Pro 5.1 or later. And it gives you like some versions basically in plain English like the year. But if you look at the System Report, you'll notice that under Hardware, you'll see the model name MacBook Pro and then the model identifier MacBook Pro 8,2. And so this means that my MacBook from 2011 should be able to run AutoCAD on the Mac. Okay. One of the things that we get here on the very bottom is a link from AutoCAD 2013, and basically we were getting this error when launching AutoCAD, and basically the video card wasn't powerful enough. And if you go into your system report, it will actually, you know, it's actually quite low, and that's the reason why you're getting that error. Okay. Another thing too is I always look at video card, and again, you can look at it in the certified hardware list as well. Okay. The next one is to check your system requirements. It's part of it as well. Mac OS X is quite unique because every point release is basically like almost like a new OS. So it's been updated every year, pretty much. Not like Windows, where Windows usually you're on Windows 7 for like 2 or 3 years. So there's some differences there. Another thing too is usually when a product is released, you can only run it on maybe 2 OSs in OS X. So it's either 10.8, 10.9, or 10.9, 10.10. Usually you can't use an older version of the OS with newer software. There's also, so basically Apple has introduced free updates for 10.9 and 10.10. So I always try to upgrade cautiously. We always check the list of certified hardware before we jump onto a new OS, basically. The next one is for older software. There's a new security feature in OS X, and it's continued from, let's say, 10.6, 10.7. It's called Gatekeeper. That's the term that they use. But basically, if you go under the security and privacy panel, you'll see that there's apps downloaded from App Store and identified developers and anywhere. And so when Apple introduced this new feature, some of our installers actually don't have identified developers. It doesn't say Maya by Autodesk or AutoCAD by Autodesk, so the installer wouldn't go through. So that's one tip that you should definitely be aware of. Again, if you're on a newer OS and newer software, you'll never have this problem, but just as a tip if you are going to install older software on a computer. Number 5, installing and uninstalling AutoCAD is easy. Okay, so when you go through the user interface, it's not like the Windows version. There's very little user interface. It's just a very small window. You basically choose standalone or network, put in the serial number or product key, and you just follow the prompts basically. Once the software is installed, there is an icon to remove AutoCAD as well, so that's pretty easy as well. And there's also a license transfer utility. Just as a tip, if you, for example, buy AutoCAD for Windows, you can actually use the same serial number and product key to activate AutoCAD on the Mac. If you actually buy AutoCAD for the Mac, you have to use the specific product key for that Mac version. So there are some advantages. I have a feeling why they separated that is they wanted to know who was buying AutoCAD on the Mac, so that would be an easier way to figure out who bought it. But it's completely, the licensing is completely transferable basically. So if you had one on the Mac, you could probably contact the front desk team and have a Windows serial number generated for you if you needed. Okay. Number 6, installing and uninstalling Maya. Installing Maya is easy. It's just like the AutoCAD version, but the uninstall is actually a very manual process. And so one of the ways on OS X to get into a quote-unquote hidden folder is you go to the Go menu, go to Folder, and then you type in the path /USR, and basically it will show up in the Finder window, and it'll be kind of like in a ghosted form, and you'll see the hidden folders that aren't displayed by default. Some of the ones that are for Maya, this is like for 2014 or older, but there's Backburner. The user local FlexNet server is where the licensing software is installed, so you will never see that. And then barflexlm is where the network license file is, and then the other folders deal with licensing as well. So again, just follow the link on the blog, and it tells you where that information is. Okay. The next one is there's also free software now in 2015. That's where you get Maya Composite or Composite, Match Mover, and Backburner. So if you're an AutoCAD user, you could actually use Composite or Match Mover or give it a try. It's completely free now. And also there are Network License Manager software. It's also listed here as well. So if you went in here and installed these 2 products, you would have to go back, and if you needed to delete Backburner, then go to these folders basically. So usually if the folder exists, you've installed it. If the folder doesn't exist, it hasn't been installed. Okay? Number 8, Time Machine and backups. I love backups. Backup your software as often as possible. Like backup everything. It is a good thing turn on the Mac. The only thing that you have to do is you have to add an exception in Time Machine for this particular folder. This is where the on Windows this is where the .data file is, and if you're a Windows user, you'll know that that's where our standalone licensing file is, and basically if you delete that file, it'll force a reactivation. Another thing with Time Machine is that if you are, let's say, upgrading to 10.9 or 10.10, when you install it, Time Machine can import all the data as well, and you actually don't want to do that because you actually have to delete all these folders noted in the post below. You have to actually delete a whole bunch of folders before you can actually reactivate the software. So it's a very detailed workflow, and it's noted on the blog. So the bottom line is you want to use Time Machine, back up your software or back up your files, set an exception to this folder, and if you ever use Time Machine to bring a machine back, you may have to follow some steps to basically reset your licensing so that you can actually activate it correctly. Okay? Parallels, Fusion, and Boot Camp. So there's two supported methods to run our software basically. There is Parallels, and usually, you know, I try to create this icon here, but basically when it's this first image here, when it's green, that's like your whole operating system. So basically you have Mac OS 10, you install Parallels, and then you create a little you create a space on your drive to install Windows, and then you install AutoCAD on there. That works perfectly. Okay, that's your standard Parallels setup, default. Okay, the next one is using Boot Camp. So basically you use the Boot Camp manager, you split the drive, and then basically you'd have to reboot in Windows to run the Windows version of AutoCAD, and then you have to reboot back into the Mac and do that as well. I usually prefer that method because you get better performance. You're not emulating AutoCAD basically. Lastly, the one that is not supported is there's a very specialized customization in Parallels where you can actually split your drive, so you'll have Boot Camp set up, but then when you launch Parallels, you actually can point to that Windows drive that you have created to run it. The problem is that it actually breaks the activation of AutoCAD. So this is actually getting less and less of an issue because you now have a native version of AutoCAD on the Mac, but for other products that support Parallels like Inventor, you definitely want to use the conventional method, either Boot Camp or Parallels or Fusion in default mode. Okay? I've also created, there's two other items in here as well that talk about it as well. There's a solution here about Retina displays and Parallels as well, so you have to kind of follow those two posts as well. Okay. Finally, under Boot Camp settings for Autodesk Software, so sometimes when you boot into Boot Camp, in this case Mudbox wouldn't start up correctly. It said that you needed a ATR and Nvidia graphics card. In this case the Mac had it. But the default install didn't have the driver set up yet, so all you had to do is just go to the Nvidia site and download a driver for the GeForce card basically. So it's just like Windows. You know, it's a completely, so if it's almost like as if you're running Windows in safe mode. There's no graphics card basically. Okay, I think we have a poll question. The poll question: do you use Boot Camp or Parallels? I can tell you I prefer Boot Camp. I like speed.
I'm just going to give it another second. We get 19% voted. All right, we're going to close it out in just a second.
Oh wow, that's good. There's still some people that use Parallels. So, yeah, so anyone who uses Parallels, definitely, you definitely want to kind of follow some of the that blog post that I had about some activation issues if you do use it that way. All right. Let me know when you're ready, Dave. Perfect. Thank you. We also had some interesting troubleshooting issues back in the day. A lot of times you can screen share these days. So on the Mac, there's like like sharing where you can share the windows, almost like Windows Remote Desktop. And in this case, I was troubleshooting like AutoCAD not launching. And in this case, the end user actually didn't have a monitor hooked up to it. So you can actually, on Windows, you can do that easily. Like usually for servers, you don't have a window or a monitor. You can just Windows Remote Desktop into something and test it. So we were troubleshooting for many, many days, many hours. And finally, he went in and said, oh, there's no monitor on it. So as soon as he plugged in the monitor, AutoCAD worked perfectly. So there's also another one where we discussed like Autodesk Recap back in the day, 1.0. Same issue basically. It doesn't work with Windows Remote Desktop. So just be aware that sometimes it could be hardware related. You just have to, sometimes you don't know until you actually call a customer up and figure that out. Standalone, desktop subscription, and network licensing. So just to give you an idea, desktop subscription is really just a form of standalone licensing. All right. So for AutoCAD products, you actually have to uninstall it and reinstall it to change the license type. But for Maya, and actually the only product that does it is Maya, is you can actually change this license.env file from standalone to network. So this has kind of like been around since version 1.0. And it's really just to save time for the big studios if they're running standalone or network, so you don't have to uninstall it or reinstall it. So we've kind of built that functionality since day one. Another note is, it's not documented anywhere, but Mentoray Standalone is included with only a network license. So if you do a desktop subscription, it's not supported. So one of the cool things is, how do you change the standalone to network? So I kind of posted it here. All you have to do is, in 2014 and higher, there's a license.env file. You basically double-click it, open it in text edit. You change the word standalone to network or network to standalone, and it'll just convert right over into that version. And so as soon as you launch the product, it'll try to look for a license server if you made it network, or if it's standalone, it'll go into standalone mode, go to trial, or if it's desktop subscription, it may connect that way as well. So it's kind of cool. It's pretty much, the only difference is that the license.env location is different for the older versions. There's a bit more work to get there, but I've included the 2 posts that deal with it. The next option is, and we've gotten this a couple times, is the default installer doesn't have a button for redundant. It's not often that we've gotten this. I've actually asked the developers about this, and it's a low request. Not a lot of people use redundant on Mac products, basically. But all you have to do is just install it as a network version. You go to the var FlexLM folder or the lakepath.lic file, and you just edit the file and make it redundant. So you just use a file, basically. So again, I have a screen capture of Alias here, but it applies pretty much to all the Autodesk products because they all use the same wizard to install the product. Service packs. Maya typically always has been a full install on the Mac. So if there's Maya 2015 Service Pack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can actually, it's a full install basically. You'd have to uninstall the old version or delete it and then reinstall the new version. For AutoCAD on the Mac, it's usually a patch. It just patches some items in there and it just kind of works. And the best way to tell is just to check the file size and also look at the README files. So in this the article below about 2015 Extension 1 Service Pack 5, it discusses how to do it on Windows and on a Mac. And as I said, you just have to look at the file size. On the Windows, it may be a patch, but always on a Mac, it's always a full install. I think a lot of the libraries are all built in there that way, and there's no way of changing it. It's like built to the core. Deploying software on the Mac. So this is a good question for a lot of the big studios. Basically 2014 it was a bit more complicated. It was a command line method. Actually, for the 2014 method, I'd actually helped a school do it, and they were able to kind of go through a lot of the stuff themselves, and then they had logged a case, and I kind of helped them figure out how to do it on the other end, and they documented it, so I gave them credit because they did all the work for it. actually in 2015 Maya, they actually built it into their setup to allow command line install. So it's not really deploying software, it's more like a command line, so you don't actually have to hit the next button anymore. Just have to kind of put all the install parameters in a command line and just hit next, next, next. You don't have to hit next, just run the command and you're good to go. And the cool thing is you can script it as well. It's all, I mean, for Windows, you have to kind of create the deployment and then double click it, or use SCCM to push the deployment out. This is the only product that can do a command line install. All the other products require you to hit next, so it's not a feature in any other product at this time. Okay, this is a really good one. Configuring a Mac with an environment variable. So in the last maybe 2 or 3 months, I had 2 questions on this, and I just basically repurposed the videos that I created for the end user for the customer. And everyone knows how to add an environment variable in Windows. This has been the same since Windows 95. You go to I don't even have to tell you how to do it because most people know how to do it. But on the Mac, there's many ways to do it. So there's a post there basically. And in this case, the scenario was the user had an LM project environment variable. So, one project was, let's say, for the architecture firm in the Americas, and then another firm or another group of licenses was going to, let's say, the EMEA team, basically. And so they had like AutoCAD on the Mac, but it didn't, you have to have an environment variable so that you know which license it's pulling from. So, we had to kind of troubleshoot that a little bit and work it out. So there's a solution for that. So it's a combination. So I actually created 3 solutions. One is to create an options file, how to do it on Windows. The second one is how to add an environment variable in Maya because it's a little bit easier in Maya. And then on AutoCAD, because it doesn't have a way of adding environments, you have to do it through the system. So I had to create, there's 2 solutions or 3 solutions, but then in the blog post it talks about why you use all 3, basically, because the guy had Maya and AutoCAD on the Mac, basically. So it's kind of cool process on that one. Here's another great one here, which I recently found out. Everyone knows how to reset AutoCAD on Windows. It's built into the menu item. And for the Mac, you basically hold Shift, double-click the apple, and basically you got happy face. That is the easiest way to reset AutoCAD on the Mac. However, it's only for newer versions of AutoCAD with a certain service pack. Again, follow that blog post. It'll tell you which version it's supported for. I have a feeling it's only for the newer versions, so I can't recall. But it's in the post. Finally, we have some various tips and tricks on the blog that deal with AutoCAD on the Mac, corrupted fonts in AutoCAD, printing in PDFs. I had one user who had 3 displays on his MacBook Pro. So he had a display out, like a DisplayPort Thunderbolt. Then he had a USB HDMI adapter, and also his screen. And AutoCAD was crashing. And finally, we had to kind of go in and make sure. So again, if you put too much hardware on there, it is possible that the software will crash. I had another case when AutoCAD first came out. It was a pretty major bug, but it was fixed later. But if you put symbols in the name of a file, it would actually delete that directory, which was crazy. So it's almost best to, because Unix is very specific, like that's what OS X is built on, don't use any symbols. It's either numbers, letters, underscores. Don't put spaces in a name. I just prefer not to do it. It does support it, but it's best not to do it. It's just, I'm kind of old school that way. There's also, again, some new features in AutoCAD 2015 and LT. It's referenced on our blog, but I'm going to put it for the AutoCAD Insider. They're trying to make AutoCAD on the Mac a bit better and more similar to the Windows version. It's not exactly the same, but it's getting there. I also queried the AutoCAD team as well. And I'd like to thank Christina Davis and Victoria Studley for sending me some articles that they use often for troubleshooting issues with AutoCAD on the Mac. So again, how to show tool palettes, AutoCAD for the Mac doesn't show the menu, and toolsets palettes is blank. Palettes information or location. Freeze when editing plot style tables for the Mac. Okay. Finally, one of the things that I also like to do is I never try to rename a file. Especially, the good thing is in AutoCAD, it's actually labeled AutoCAD 2015. But for Maya, since version 1.0, it's always been called Maya. So the only difference is that it would have a folder in Autodesk, and it'll say Autodesk Maya 2009. And if you go there, you'll see Maya. And then you see AutoCAD 20 or Maya 2010. And then in that folder, you see a Maya in there. And then it would go on. So the only way you could tell which version of Maya you're running is basically the folder that it's in. So we had an issue where the user was just basically renaming Maya and call it Maya 2015. The problem, and then basically adding that to the dock, and then you could, if you hover over it, the shortcut, you can see that it's like Maya 2015. The problem is that when you uninstall it, some of the paths are actually hard-coded in Unix, so it can break rendering or something because the paths aren't different. So it's best to kind of leave it all the same and use an alias. An alias is basically a shortcut on the Mac. So when I say make alias, it's actually a shortcut. That's what it is. So you're just kind of like, it's almost like you're making a shortcut and you're calling it something else. And then you put the shortcut on the dock. Okay? This one here talks about permissions. Now, this one here, there's like root and super user. I usually use super user, which is, or super do, super user do, sudo. But this one here, there was a permissions problem, and you know, the easiest thing to do is just go to disk first aid and either verify or repair disk permissions, and that will probably solve some issues as well with not authorizing a user, basically. Oh, wait a second. This one here. Oh, this is. Oh, sorry. My apologies. This one here, this blog post, talks about root user, which is different from disk first aid. My apologies. And this one here, you actually have to enable root user for certain conditions to work out. So this is old. My apologies. This link, this image is not correct. But this one here. But I think I want to talk about two items. My apologies. There's also disk permissions, which deals with permissions and root as well. So there's two issues here. One of them is an occasional error message where you need to be root for it to work, which is highly unlikely in most programs. And then there's also permissions as well under you're fixing permissions basically, which is root or your user or guest. If you ever wanted to learn basic Unix or commands in the terminal, the Smoke team actually has created some documentation, so I kind of linked here. And I also talk about root as well, same thing, because they all deal with the same issue. One of the cool things is that, just like in Windows now, or Windows and Mac, they're very similar. When you go to the command prompt, is that, or terminal, is just remember to use the tab key for file completion. So, you know, if you're typing in something like, if you're going to a particular folder, you can just type in the first two letters and hit tab, and it'll file complete. So you can save a lot of time. You don't actually have to spell the whole word, basically. This is pretty important as well. The library folder is actually hidden, your personal library folder. This is important because that's where the MyPress are located. And that's where some of the settings for your account are set up as well. So there's two library folders. There's one at the root of your drive, and basically that drive, that applies to all users, but then you also have your own sets. So a lot of times you need to access that. So this post talks about how to get there. The easy way to do is if you click on go to folder, all you have to do is just hit the Option key while hitting go, and you'll notice like a little folder comes up. Maybe I'll just drop out of this presentation for a second. I can show you. So if I go in here, and I go to the Finder, and I go, this is my options here, and as soon as I hit the Option key, there's a library folder. So if I toggle that, you'll notice it kind of disappears. And this is your own personal library folder for your own settings, kind of like your user's folder, username, app data. Okay, let me go back into presentation mode. Okay, finally we have our last poll question. Which Autodesk product will you be supporting? AutoCAD, Alias, Maya, Smoke, Mudbox.
Can you rip off 40%?
Okay. Just to let you know, Alias, Maya, Mudbox, and Sketchbook Pro. We couldn't add Sketchbook Pro in here. They're all developed in the Toronto office. I'm from the Toronto office. AutoCAD's based in the U.S. Their dev team. Smoke is based in Montreal.
Okay, still pulling. Okay, we'll wrap it up for now.
AutoCAD. Perfect. Looks like 83% are AutoCAD and all the rest are low volume. All right. Okay, we're getting to the final one. We've been posting a lot of, our blog has a lot of, tips and tricks basically. I always talk about Pixlr. It's a really good program to use. We also use Screencast. Doesn't work on the Mac, but hopefully it'll get there. Also, we have a category on the Up and Ready site that deals with all Mac issues. So if you are a Mac user, definitely go to that section and you can see kind of like some issues are universal. They're on the Mac and PC, but it's a good historical data going all the way back to 2011. And finally, questions. We're on questions. I'm going to explain the toolbar and see if we have any questions.
All right, I got some I pulled up here. One of the ones we have here, one of the last ones that came in was referring to network licensing, on how to install network licensing on Mac systems, that the existing literature on the website's poor. We do have a webinar coming up with this. I believe it's 2 webinars away. We're going to talk about network licensing and the Mac. It's a little more difficult than the Mac because everything is done via a command line. So you can imagine all the problems that people have when they're using even a Windows version where they have a GUI. We have issues to troubleshoot with that. When we switch over to Mac where we have a command line, you can imagine the difficulties we may have. We see a variety of different users in our travels. Some people are much more experienced than others. So people that aren't familiar with running commands in a command window will generally have difficulty. But basically, it's doable. With Mac, it is, of course, it works or it doesn't work, and there's not a lot of tweaking that goes on. So with the network licensing part, which, like I said, we'll discuss in a future webinar, basically you set it up according to instructions, and if it doesn't work, you've done something wrong according to the instructions almost always. But we'll definitely review that documentation. We obviously want people to be able to use this that need to, so it's definitely something we're going to look at.
I can add to that, Dave, is because I use this on our blog under the Google search window. Just type in Quick Start Mac, because if you go to Quick Start Windows, it'll go to our Quick Start Windows guide to set up a licensed server. I just kind of glued all the instructions together. If you do it for Linux, it tells you how to do it on Linux. There's a link there. And finally,
Linux is awesome, except you really have to pay attention to your commands.
Yeah. And finally, on the Mac. So if you ever want to, you can review it, just do Quick Start Mac, and basically you can go through all this documentation here. I try to make it a bit more user-friendly and more standardized. But again, I think we can discuss it in the webinar next year, but you can definitely review it in here.
Okay, another one is, do you have to delete the residual folders from an uninstall? So basically, when you, I know the poll question said predominantly AutoCAD, but of course there are other products that are supported on Mac, just not as large a volume as our Windows products. When you uninstall AutoCAD, do you need to delete these folders? No, but it's something you would do if you're running into problems. So when you need to, the need for performing a clean uninstall really depends on the user and the system and the situation. When we see issues like this, what's happening is somebody's contacting us and they're saying, you know, when I install AutoCAD, I have these problems or it's not working right. So they uninstall it and then they reinstall it trying to fix it. And then usually we see cases where they've done that and then they contact us saying it's not working, which usually tells us that, okay, when you uninstall the software, one of the left behind files or folders is causing your problem because they weren't changed when the reinstall happened. Because they were already present, the software wouldn't readjust files that were already there. Usually this is, you know, leftover stuff in AutoCAD. It'll be, you know, the licensing will be left behind. Usually the user settings, some of the install stuff. In Mac, there is a finite amount of spaces for it. I think when David put up the list, I think there's 4 or 5 locations. One you may need to type in manually. You don't need to delete them until you're having issues. So if this was just somebody saying, I want to pull AutoCAD off the machine, leaving a couple of folders behind, small files here, they're not usually a big deal. Granted, if you wanted to remove them, you could. Usually we only see the need to do this when someone's having problems reinstalling or activating. The symptoms can vary, of course, but that's generally when we do it.
Yeah, I think just to follow, because the post here talks about it, is that if you're basically when you uninstall AutoCAD, it's just you click on the uninstall icon and it uninstalls. If you reinstall AutoCAD again on the same computer, right, it doesn't reactivate the software because it's already been activated. So again, for people who work on Windows a lot, this is where you get your quote-unquote .data file. I'll give you an image of it right here. See this .data file? That's the same one on Windows basically. And then, you know, that's where you have to kind of be careful because with Adobe products, some Adobe products will have data files in there, so there's a workflow where you have to kind of like, don't delete everything, you should rename it and then reinstall it and recreate it. There's also another folder that common, you know, it's called ADLM. It's located in this location as well. So as long as so these are like the basic steps if you're doing AutoCAD, but if you're doing like Maya, Sketchbook, Alias, you may have to do this method because the teams that developed it, which is based in Toronto, we kind of went in when we were developing it, when it first were porting stuff to the Mac, we went, they're pretty Unix savvy, so we won't do it. You have to do it all through the command line. So if you actually go to the documentation for Maya, uninstall Mac, you'll notice like there's all these command line methods basically. But you know, we're visual people who work on the Mac. It's like I want an icon to delete, so I kind of went in. You go in here and you basically, you know, delete the folder that way. And again, you know, you just have to go to like in here, click on go to folder. I already have an example. It remembers the last one /user, and it just goes to that folder basically.
Yeah. So if you get a user that's skittish and they don't want to delete things, you can just rename them. You know, just move them into a new folder. You know, that's not something that's easy too. When you're in that when you're looking at the TSF data file, just drop a new folder in that location, drag and drop the files into that folder. As long as they're removed from that location, when you start the program, it will attempt to build a new one if it's not there.
Yep. Okay. Again, there's a video here about how to do your exceptions here for FlexNet Publisher afterwards, so that's an important one to go through.
Is there a preferred Mac operating system? Well, basically, David mentioned some of the releases for a Mac operating system have been free, the last few, so I know that's really tempting. Obviously, free is good, so people like that. However, if you've noticed the last couple of releases for Mac, the releases that they've given are in the fall, and our product releases are in the spring, so they can do whatever they want to their operating system up until the day it's released. So our developers can't compensate for changes they may make, so they don't bother. They have to configure in an environment that's stable, that's been released. So currently, Yosemite, I believe, is the latest one available for Mac right now. It is very possible that the software will work in Yosemite. The problem is, if it installs correctly and starts up, that's great. But if you have a problem with a functionality somewhere in the program, and you're on an unsupported operating system, there's not going to be too much we can do besides report behavior to development for fix in a future release.
Yeah.
So, I suppose this is something, you look at the system requirements. If you meet the system requirements, that's all you really need to do. You need to get to that level. Pretty much Mavericks is supported across the board. That's probably what I would personally stick with.
Yep.
If you had a test machine and you wanted to go to Yosemite, I can understand because people want to goof around on the latest stuff. It's just you're taking a chance. If you run into any sort of issues, we're going to be limited to what we can do. So one of the first things we do is, we check in cases where, okay, is this something that is supported? Because it's possible that it wasn't designed to work in the operating system. So.
Yep, I agree. So I just try to I brought up the system requirements, and you'll see like 2015, it's noted here, and over here there's like, so basically you want to be a little bit behind. You don't want to be at 10.10 at this point. You would definitely want to be at 10.9. Then you know that all the applications are going to work. It's almost like if you're going to first. It's like if you're on Windows and you're on Windows 8 and it came out, let's say today, you don't want to be the first person on it. You want to wait like 3 months. Make sure that's all good, and then you kind of jump that way. That's the route I would go.
We had a question. I know it's a little different, but is it possible that the network licensing service can be set to start automatically when you restart the system?
That is the holy grail of questions. There is a post on the blog that talks about it. It's a very manual process. You have to create a script. I think it's in the documentation in the Maya part to do that. But it is a common question. I haven't had to do it in a while, though. There is a... Dave, I think we should get that user's email, and we can send them... I know I've written an article, but it was unpublished because I couldn't verify it, basically, about an auto restart. So...
Okay.
Yeah, Mac restart script. I don't know if... I wrote one in here once before, a long time ago, on the blog. I can't remember what the search parameters are, but it was a typo in the documentation, and if you don't do it right, it definitely won't work. So, but we can take that one offline because that is actually going to be would be a good question for the 2-week presentation in the new year with OS 10 licensing.
Yes, I'll make sure to get his email. Okay, good. I did have one more. Can you uninstall from the Mac with a silent command, like a silent uninstall like you do in Windows? I've never heard of that functionality in Mac. Generally speaking, uninstalls are very different with the Mac. Obviously, it's a matter of, for older versions, there'll be an icon for uninstall. For some of the newer versions, you just simply drag to the trash, and that will pull out the basic installation of the files. It's a more heavily bundled program. Dave, are you aware of any routines for uninstalling in Mac?
No, because the install process is pretty much all like user-based, user interface-based. So, like for example, AutoCAD, you have to hit next, next, next. So, if there was a silent way of installing it, there may be a silent way of uninstalling it, right? With Maya, this is new. Like 2015 came out with documentation on how to install it silently, but we've never researched how to uninstall it.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down as a I would like to see if it's possible. So I'm gonna flag that one for some further review.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not a question that a lot of people have asked.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I got that email address for that question. I got that out of here, and I got a secondary person that was asking too. We're gonna this information that we pull, we'll definitely post. We'll keep all the information together when we're collecting the questions and posting the results on our blog. No, not the blog, excuse me, the forums. We like to wrap up these questions and reproduce them for people out there. So if they go through the recorded session and they see what we're talking about, they actually have documentation to point to. So that'll be there too. Have there been any reported issues with NLM 112 and the 2015 products? Reported issues. Um, the 11.12 version is supposed to allow you to use the 2015 products. So I know that if you're not using 11.12, you're not going to open any 2015. There's no particular outage that I'm aware of. So far, it's been a pretty good release of the licensing technology. Not to say that there aren't some problems in certain places, but overall, the 11.12 is working really well for us.
Yeah, I think as long as you're using a 2015 NLM, like 11.12, any 2015 or older product will work on it, basically.
Yeah, it's been pretty stable. I've never run into a situation where I've had somebody having problems with older versions on 11.12.
Yeah. Here's an example like of some cross-platform licensing I'd done a while ago. This is like in 2012, so I know it definitely works, but as long as you use the latest NLM on Windows or on Mac, you know, you could have like a Mac license server running 11.12 and you should be able to license it to Windows. But again, the tricky part is that quote-unquote restart script that not a lot of people have mastered. You know, so I find like the LM tools, the kind of like the easier way to go, because at least it'll have that restart option automatically as a service, basically. So, anyways, to get to this post, I used the term cross-platform. This was like way back in 2012. Oh, there's one other question I want to show you as well, which I didn't post in the blog, and we should document it. Here it is. Here it is. If you type in Mac lick path, the reason why I didn't kind of post this is because it may be for next week's presentation for licensing, but this is kind of like the standard location for licensing for if you're doing a network license. So like for Maya, we always put the license file here, varflexlm lick path. So this would be like the lickpath.lic, and this would be for, let me make this a little bit bigger. So I just searched for Mac lick path, and I kind of document it. So basically, the reason why Maya stuff is always in varflexlm, it's been around since you know, version 1.0. We've always put it there. But the more standard location is user local FlexNet server for, let's say, AutoCAD and Smoke Team. They put it there. And then basically for the Smoke license file, they put it here, just like the Maya stuff, because this is like all Unix-based, basically. And then finally, I think AutoCAD is doing it correctly. The best way is they put this in the standard location. It's noted in Flexera, basically. And for the client file, you just have to kind of go to AutoCAD and right mouse click on AutoCAD to get your show package contents. Now the thing is, I think when I installed my AutoCAD, I can show you here, I may have installed it as a standalone. I did, because it says license transfer utility, but you'd have to go to show package contents, and there would be like a lickpath.lic file in here if you've installed it as a network version. But I don't think I did. Maybe I did. Contents. Library. I might have to research it a bit more. We'll take that offline. Dave, mental note, lickpath.lic for Mac. I'm going to double check it.
You got it. All right.
Contents. I'm going to try and figure it out now. I just will show package contents. Contents.
Yeah, different install type.
Contents. There should be a lick path in here. They may have changed it. Or I didn't install it as a, maybe I installed it as a standalone.
Okay, that looks like it's the last of the questions we have. Is there anything else you want to mention, Dave, before we kick off?
I'm going to find out if my AutoCAD is a standalone. I'm going to launch it. I hope it runs. I am running 10.9. Is there any more questions, Dave?
Nope, that's the last one, buddy.
I'm just waiting for my AutoCAD to launch. I just want to see if I install it as a standalone or a network, and we can call it a day. Thank you, everyone, for waiting for my product to launch.
All right, so we'll be wrapping up these questions, and we'll be publishing these on the website either later today or possibly tomorrow morning. We'll also have a link up there pointing to our YouTube channel with this video along with the other presentations we have.
So I just want to confirm that the lick path file is probably in the contents folder if you've installed it as a network version.
Yep.
Right now, my AutoCAD is a trial version. That's why it's not there. So I think I solved that problem. Yay.
All right. Great. Well, I think that's it for today.
Thanks for your time, everyone.